Yeah,
Okay.
so let's start talking about first Discovery Mountain, of course, because it was the beginning of the project itself. So, as you told us before in the last episode, you knew since the beginning of creation of Discovery Land that you needed a mountain, so a space mountain, something mountain inside the land itself, an etiquette ride. So, what inspired you to create this first version, the first iteration that you imagined with Discovery Mountain, as big as it was in the concept? Was it because of the first concept for the starport itself in the 60s, which was a multi-ride experience also? Or what gave you the idea of imagining a big place like Discovery Mountain right in the center of Discovery Land?
Well, one of the things that we let's go back in time to the very beginning of a decision to take the park and put it in Paris, right? And so, being Californians, we were always focused on like, well, oh my gosh, in the wintertime, no one's going to come because it snows outside and it gets cold and all that. So when we were first starting the park, we looked for opportunities to make sure the park could function year round. When Eddie Sato did the galleries or and when he was doing that, that was all part of not only people leaving the park and getting better access. I mean, right now Disneyland is a disaster when they have 60,000 people there and everybody has to funnel through Main Street. So we thought, well, we could do that. Plus, you protect people, and we're talking about. Michael Eisner was also pushing this thing too. It's like, well, when you do the park, we should put fireplaces everywhere. And so by the time we got involved with, specifically the French people and some of the other European people who were managing the project, they all kind of laughed at us and said, you guys only worry about that stuff because you're in California, because you have good weather all the time. And if there's a drop of water that falls in the sky, Californians freak out. And so we thought, okay, we could do this. So then one of the things, and so while you have that in your mind about what you're doing, so when it came to Discoveryland, I thought, well, maybe we could do a new version of Space Mountain, something where the mountain being 100 meters in diameter would be large enough to, and all the attractions were going to connect, okay, from Videopolis into the mountain to Star Tours to Captain EO Theater or the Cinemagique. They would all have, it was always going to be like this big, I hate the word shopping mall, but you understand it was a big complex where everybody could actually function and move around the land. So they could, they could come in and it was basically without doing an indoor land. We do a big attraction and put other things inside there. And yet you're going to build a giant building anyway. So why don't we just make it a little bit bigger? And, it was like this. And again, we didn't have a design. We didn't have attractions listed. We didn't have any of that stuff done yet. But it was just like, well, everyone throw your suggestions out there and say like, well, so we could do a new Space Mountain that is enormous in size. I mean, the Space Mountain that is in Florida, which is really quite a beautiful, elegant building, is quite large. I mean, it's 300 feet in diameter, I think. It's almost a little less than 100 meters. So, and that building sits out on its own, and it's right beautiful and all that. So we thought, well, okay, here's an idea. So you just start with that. You start, you start your creative work by understanding the problems, or you're looking for solutions. Okay. And again, this was all based on, our desire to make sure the park would function all the time and didn't get cold, or if it was cold, but people could come in and still explore all that. So, believe it or not, as much of that was an idea, we kind of always knew that whatever the Space Mountain was going to be, I mean, in the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't going to be there for opening day. So the development of the mountain was really quite limited. The development really was basically these big renderings that I did of the interior and of the exterior, and so it really didn't get much farther than that because I knew it was going to be opening day, and we were, again, as I mentioned to you before, what is a Discovery Land? What is it? And so we were really kind of working like, how do we make all of this work together? At the same time, when I was doing, you're working with your team and you're doing master planning of the land, and I mentioned this last time, is that we had to make sure, it was really important to me that even though there was going to be a plan for a 100-meter diameter mega structure there, I wanted to make sure that the land didn't look like we forgot something. Mm-hmm. So in that way, when you came into the land, you had Visionarium and you had Videopolis, and then you had to walk all the way around to get back to the Star Tours and all that stuff. Well, there was that berm that kind of went around, and I had these, what we call berm structures, and they were just kind of these, pillars of lighting, and it was just raised berm. And so you kind of, when I spoke last time about how to create placemaking, you compress the walkways and you compress the space. One of the things that once we ended up building that, if you remember, there was a staircase. Oh, no. I'm sorry. You don't remember this because you never saw it.
About what?
Okay.
Which one?
Okay. So on Videopolis, operations required that we had staircases coming out of those two big round tubes. And those round tubes literally were going to be bridges that went across into the 100-meter diameter Discovery Mountain. But because the mountain wasn't going to be there, they still needed a way to evacuate the number of people out of Videopolis, right? And I hated the staircases. I hated them because what happened is that, as I mentioned, we narrowed the corridor down to where the Space Mountain or the new Discovery Mountain was going to be. But what happens is that without the staircases, you could visually look straight back and see Star Tours. Remember when I told you that everything is about connecting the dots? Mm-hmm. So you go from one thing to the next to the next thing. Well, it all worked great. You get to Videopolis, and then you go past Orbitron, you go look at Videopolis, and now you're looking at Star Tours. Then I saw these poor guys build and install the staircase, a staircase that came down made out of steel. And so these guys are welding all this stuff. So we're like, they said, well, we have, requirements for evacuation, et cetera, et cetera.
Let's close them.
So we're like, so I'm like, okay. I mean, from my point of view, I really didn't know how. I hope I don't get into the weeds too far here, but I'm telling you, this is how theme parks work. So I could think, well, so what happens? How do you get a fire truck back there? Oh, no. This is going to be more important. We have to have a staircase. So I'm like, okay. And I watched these guys weld this staircase for weeks. Okay. So they get it all painted and all that. So Michael Eisner comes into town, and Michael comes walking out there, and he looks at this thing, and he looks at me, and he like, what's that?
Well,
I said, I don't know. I mean, you talk to these guys. I mean, I don't know. I can't. What happens is in a lot of these discussions, the management will tell you how to do things. And believe me, I'm sure the pompier or whoever the hell it was working on all this stuff.
The doom of the stairs was sealed already.
So they're saying, well, we have to have this stuff. And so, in the face of you have to have something, I guess you have to do with it. So you kind of design it. And the reason it was, to answer your question more specifically, why it was steel, is because it was more of a lacy, more open. If it was concrete, it would have been a total block. There was a man who was head of the project from Disney. His name was Mickey Steinberg. And Mickey Steinberg was kind of like the general in charge. It was almost, he was a military guy, and a great man, a truly great man, a great leader, really knew his stuff. So Mickey's standing there, and he's listening to the whole thing. So I'm like, so then again, you're in Discovery Land, and when you go on these walks with a guy like Michael Eisner, who was a chairman of the Walt Disney Company, and he's keenly interested in the design of everything, you have these like groups of like 50 people who walk around, and they all surround him. And I don't go on those walks. I just wait for him to come to the land, and then we talk about the stuff. So Michael just walks about and he looks, and he's always looking at me like, do you want that? And I'm like, I don't want it, but that's not, the rules are such. So they all, in this whole mass, they go walking off to, I don't know, probably from Fantasyland. So one of the most shocking events ever happened, as far as I was concerned. The next morning, I came back, and I came back in the morning, I was there probably 7 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Again, because you start your days, all day long. And I come walking in, and I used to park behind Star Tours, and I'd come in that there's a passageway from back of house to between Captain EO Theater or the 3D Theater and the Star Tours. And I come walking out there, and I see Mickey Steinberg just standing. I just see him standing as I come around the corner. I come farther around the corner, and the staircases are gone. And I don't mean just taken down. They were gone completely. I'm like, you try to imagine a double staircase comes out to a landing, down the stairs to another landing, turns 90 degrees. And these things are massive, right? They are gone. When I say disappear or gone. So what they did is that in the middle of the night, and Mickey probably came out and said, we're going to get rid of these things. They probably had guys with cutting torches, cut them. They had a crane come lift them out and lift them over those berm structures and that temporary berm that we put where Space Mountain was going to be. And they were just lying in a pile right behind that. And I was like, I was completely amazed. I mean, it's so funny. I got to tell you guys something. The benefit of doing this is I'm remembering things that I haven't thought about the way I started this, the way I was going to start this off is by saying, well, those staircases that you saw behind Videopolis? They're like,
well, they don't exist anymore.
Never saw them. I'm sure they probably put them on eBay. Staircases.
Yeah. At the time, it wasn't online yet.
But going back to the original premise here is like how this big Discovery Mountain was going to be in the middle of the land and everything was going to connect it. It was those two round thrusters on the building. There were just going to be bridges going across into the mountain, and people could come into Videopolis, go see the entertainment, and then just go up the staircase and go into the mountain and see all the other things that were going on inside that. And so obviously it was going to be a huge, huge complex. There were a lot of things going on the inside. So what it did is we said, all right, well, if you look at the mountain and its configuration, and Disney's famous for all of its mountains, Space Mountain, and Big Thunder Mountain, and all these mountains as a metaphor for everything. You'd come in, and so the ride, the kind of Space Mountain ride, was going to be in the upper, obviously the cone part of it, and then there was like a level, a mezzanine all the way around, and then there was actually 3 levels, and then you would look down onto the Nautilus submarine. The catapult launch, which I was a huge pusher of doing that. Mm-hmm. Was down on the lower levels. It would shot you into the mountain. So the ride would be up above it, and you could see up above, you could hear it. And there obviously you can't have people walking underneath the ride because of, safety issues. But that's why there was a ring on the outside, and you could look down, as I said, look down onto the Nautilus. And again, the whole being a big round thing, I don't like the structure, the basic foundation structure of these big things. So that's why the original design I had was, if you saw the original kind of soft edge Discovery Mountain, it's kind of a more curved, not straight conical, but it was more curved like that. And
there was mid-air rails. It was nice to look at, but with the real structure of a roller coaster, you have all the poles in the middle, I guess. So it's kind of complicated to have that visual.
We could have built. Actually, the design was more reminiscent of the original John Hench design for Space Mountain that was done way back in the 50s or 60s or something like that.
The one with outside tracks.
There was an outside track. There was. But I mean, that was never going to work because because of the light intrusion.
Yeah.
But but I kind of like that softer look to it. But the point I was going to make is that the whole point again goes back to this whole theme of kind of the energy and the steam and the power and the fire of Vulcania, from Jules Verne's story. Mm-hmm. So everything was like Space Mountain was sitting on top of a caldera of a volcano. So there were all kinds of fire effects inside and steam effects, and the Nautilus was rolling in there. I mean, those images of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea with the Nautilus coming through the undersea port or tunnel going in there into Volcania. The submarine sitting in the middle of the volcano is just such a powerful, compelling image. So that's what we're going to do. So basically, imagine you have the caldera, you have the submarine sitting in the water there, and then on top of that was going to be this. It was originally going to be a glass-covered structure. Beautiful. I talked to a man who got involved in the design from Ove Arup. His name was Peter Rice. Brilliant engineer who was responsible for doing the Opera House in Sydney, Australia. And so I talked with him, and such a powerful, one of the most creative, brilliant engineers in the world who about 10 years after we worked with him passed away from brain hemorrhage. But just a wonderful, Peter Rice is just a brilliant guy, and Ove Arup is a big, structural engineering firm out of London. So anyway, we started this design, and again, the park continues its construction. I get Discoveryland finished, and so very quickly after the opening, and because of various reasons and the stock going down for the Disneyland Paris stock and all that stuff, the Euro Disneyland Park wasn't performing the way they thought, and so the pressure was really put on about.
We do know about that.
Yeah.
So do I. I'm sure you're saying that from a financial point of view, but that was 30 years ago. So hopefully I'm not wounded as much as I used to be. So anyway, it became evident that. If you want to put a Space Mountain in there, you better start thinking of other options. And so, as I said, there wasn't really a huge amount of development going on. I mean, I don't think that there was ever a realistic site plan, or floor plan and sections and elevations. I mean, we kind of talked about the roof structure and what we wanted to put in, but it was all very conceptual, so not really hard line drawings. So anyway, as time went on, the financial situation in Paris, became challenging. I mean, there was no question. If you talk to the creative side of Imagineering, everyone just kind of says, well, they built too much, especially the hotels. When you think of the model of Walt Disney World, they built basically two hotels, the Polynesian Inn, they built the Contemporary, along with the Magic Kingdom, and so it was like that for 15 years, and they built the thing that people really, really, really wanted, which was the Magic Kingdom, and then we did Epcot. But they didn't have enough hotel space. So in '84, when Michael Eisner and the new management team, they could just, now it's successful, it's great. Now you build the hotels. So if we built the same model and built Disneyland Paris, or Euro Disneyland, built the theme park and maybe one or two hotels, probably the Disneyland Hotel, and I would have built 2 or 3 smaller, kind of like the Santa Fe and something like that, and just get it going and get people coming, and then let it grow the way it was supposed to grow. But we had a lot of guys in management who really wanted to build super hotels, and so that's what they did. So the park wasn't performing. That's a short version. I just didn't think. Well, that's what we thought. So people were coming, but then there was then next year there was that threat of Eisner's going to close the park, and they needed to get cooperation from from France, and all that. It was very complicated, and I didn't want to get in the middle of all that. But I was told, just go forward and do a Space Mountain.
A miracle.
Can you tell us about this famous concept art of Discovery Mountain, where we can see the Nautilus, the volcano in the background, and those rails with an attraction that seems to be suspended on the left side of the image?
Well, I think that we were looking at a couple of things, and I can't remember specifically what, it wasn't, I don't know if SNS was in business at that time. It probably was a drop tower, the Intamin version of which I wasn't really crazy about. What I really wanted was something to go the opposite way. I wanted not to be lifted up to the top and then dropped. I wanted to be shot out. This goes back to what I was telling you before. And if you look at the early renderings done in 1986, it shows the overall mountain. You'll see this thing coming out of the top. And this goes back to when you have these big, giant attractions and everything happens on the inside and nothing is seen on the outside, it loses its energy. I mean, I just like things that animate, buildings that animate, right? And especially you want to see something where the guests are participating in something, and if they kind of get lifted up to the top of the mountain and then drop down into this volcanic kind of cauldron, if you will. Mm-hmm. If from an experience, from a guest point of view, the ride itself is actually quite interesting to do that. And from a guest point of view who's not on the ride, but looking at it, you see that something is going on inside that mountain. So you're like, I need to go in there. Okay, you always want to create some stimuli that people can see, right? And and so that is my philosophy about things. You can imagine when we ended up doing this other mountain, putting the cannon on the side of the mountain.
Yeah, it's wonderful view.
I'm not sure if I see the track layout for the coaster part itself. I'm not sure if this was maybe another way to explore the concept, and maybe the coaster was left apart just for this version or were you trying to put it somewhere else into the complex? I know it's just a prevision. It's not a definitive version. It's just preparatory work, but I'm not sure about. So that's why I wanted to ask you directly the question about that.
Well, okay, so let me just tell you, and I'm emphasizing this again, that we really didn't get into that much development work. I mean, I put a coaster track up in the upper part of the mountain, but I mean, and who knows? Maybe it was magical thinking. I have no idea, But I mean, the intent was to have the ride up there, and how to suspend it. It would have probably not been possible. And this got. I can't emphasize enough is when you work on ideas, you want to get ideas out there that stimulate management and other people so they get excited about it. And then they'll give you funding to start developing it. And so a lot of the stuff wasn't developed. I mean, that's all I can say. Is it like, I look at it now and I'm like, I don't even, I don't know how it would have ever been done. So, So in a way, we kind of were forced into a solution that ended up being probably a better solution, but you never know. I mean, you never know how things like that go. It could have been a big, expensive disaster as far as I'm concerned. I don't know. I really don't know. It didn't get that much farther, but once the park itself wasn't performing, the pressure to modify that Discovery Mountain was put upon me and other people.
Okay, so if I get it correctly, you more in the beginning phases you more work like on a portfolio of a collection of ideas to try to stimulate the management and the rest of the team to see which one are getting the most votes or the most adhesion, and then after that you refocus on integrating into a master concept with time.
Yeah, and I will tell you that the attitude and tone of the company changed dramatically with the I'm going to think, how am I going to say this correctly? The non-huge success of Euro Disneyland, because the park, it's like a lot of things going on right now, like today. When you think about, the Disney parks are closed. Okay, and there's a lot of people who have opinions about it. The stock has gone down. There's a lot of, but fundamentally, there's nothing wrong. So as a result, and imagine this, when the new administration came in, as I said, in the summer of 1984, and they really got going on that January of 85, they started rolling out, and the company just took off. Everything they touched was successful. Then they do this, okay, now we're really going to put our foothold in Europe, and we're going to build this Euro Disneyland project. And this was the first one that wasn't like, it wasn't, it wasn't a home run. It was just not. And they were not used to that. So they're like, oh, and when they didn't have that, they were always like, okay, we're done with that. We're going to move on to something else now. We're going to think about something else. But I'm sitting there going, okay, how am I supposed to build a major attraction? And this was really an interesting part of the story. How am I supposed to design and build a major attraction that you're planning on closing the park about? Okay. I mean, How do we do that? And so time went on. And it wasn't like people were going, oh, golly, that ride up above is great. And that Nautilus is great. I couldn't get arrested on this project. Nobody would even take meetings with me. They were like, that Euro Disneyland project, forget it. We're going to move on. We'll move on to something else. We'll look at television and movies. And, it was like, it was kind of they stumbled. And Michael Eisner didn't like things that were not 100% hugely successful. I mean, and I understood it. I mean, it's totally understandable, and it wasn't that no one ever complained about the park. Park was beautiful. There was no question about that. There's no question about it. Okay. That was like, they were really thrilled about the park. And so that was, it was just a matter of like, we'll have to get through it. But it was mostly not issues of creativity or execution. It was about business. So, okay. So this gentleman that I told you about, Mickey Steinberg, he was like the executive in charge of the overall project. And I got called in his office and he goes, listen, Tim, you're going to have to do something else. We can't build that. We just can't build it, So you can go put a regular Space Mountain in. And that was just like, we're not doing that. Okay. So anyway, we had a team, had a project manager, Doug LeBlanc, who was a great partner to work with. This when you were in design, the way it's structured is somewhat like a movie. It's like the project manager is more like the producer and you're the director. So you have to, you can fight with them or you can work with them. So we had a really good, experienced team working on this. So I know Tony Baxter had, he was instrumental. I should have mentioned this before, but in terms of the big overall mountain, Tony, really said, hey, maybe we should do something really big and like something the size of Walt Disney World and all that. We could do something inside there. So I was like, yeah, let's give it a try. And that's what Tony's supposed to do in terms of leading. He's with big ideas. And so anyway, of course, I'm the one that gets called in, and then I sat down and said, look, I'm going to tell you right now, Mickey Steinberg would say to me, there's no way we're building that large mountain. We just can't do it. If you want a Space Mountain, you better start thinking about something else, or just pull the drawings off out of the drawers and build another one, which is something, by the way, most people don't know. When you see a major attraction like that or a coaster like that, and you see it done a couple of times, I will tell you right now, everyone goes, we'll just pull the drawings out of the drawer and we'll go do them again. That's not how it works. Every time you design an attraction like that, a ride like that, you have to completely and totally re-engineer everything. You start from scratch all over again. So there's no such thing as pull the drawings from the drawer. I'm just giving you a little insight on how this business works, right? Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, well, we're going to do that. Then I'll have to think about, I got to talk to Tony Baxter about this. And so they just said, look, you can fit the smaller one in at 62 meters in diameter. You can figure it, and you can do whatever you want, but we're not building that big one. So I start thinking about doing a smaller version of just a mountain, but the whole thing was about the ride. Mm-hmm. And how do we make this ride? And how do we start with the story? Okay, the Jules Verne story. And we talked a little bit about this before in terms of From the Earth to the Moon, and what an amazing story that was. And here was a perfect character, a perfect story for a thrill ride that's shooting you into outer space. And I said, we're going to use the cannon and we're going to catapult you. Now, there was a ride down at Knott's Berry Farm here called Montezuma's Revenge, which was a horizontal 24-passenger train.
Yeah, the Shuttle coaster.
It was a catapult launch. It didn't go to a coaster. It just shot you down into a loop, and then the train ran. The loop came out, went up the track was elevated, came to a stop, and then you rolled back through the loop backwards, and it ran out and then went through the station and stopped again. So I'm like, whoa, okay, listen, if they can shoot, they can shoot a 24,000 pound train, up to 50 miles, 60 miles an hour in 3 seconds or whatever it is, put you in a loop. Why don't we just shoot you if they can do that, we can shoot you to the top of a mountain and let you drop into the mountain. And that's exactly what we ended up doing. That was it. And our ride engineers developed the catapult system. Our ride engineers at Imagineering did a great job on putting the whole thing together. They worked with Intamin in Intamin's Vekoma.
Yeah.
Vekoma. And we did this track layout, and it on paper it all looked great.
What led you to choose the manufacturer Vekoma? Was it a choice made from the start, or did you also propose the project to other manufacturers like B&M or Intamin, for example?
Well, I will tell you right now that everybody always wants to use B&M for a ride system, but B&M won't work with Disney.
Oh.
And, well, B&M, they're like a high quality, like Mercedes-Benz-y kind of ride system, smooth as glass. It's great. They just, every time I go to the IAAPA show, they'd see my name from Disney and they would just walk away. It's like, we don't want to work with Disney, and Disney manages their projects very tight. And so that's what they didn't like. So, everybody at Disney loves B&M, and B&M loves the creative side and all that stuff for Disney, but there's a business side with it, but that's just kind of the way it goes. Anyway, it was obviously a bid, and Vekoma did it. And so, that's part of the project management side. So the important part here is that we were developing the ride system and the show, and I was working on doing the exterior design. I was doing all these renderings, and I did several iterations, and then the reality would set in, and this is the dimension, this is how big it's going to be, 62 meters. It's going to have the same kind of cone, but we kept fighting the budget. We just kept fighting the budget. The budget would, you'd work on it, and we had a target budget, and it was very clear that we had to work on that target budget, and so. Another insight about how projects are done. When you work on a project, no matter how big it is, well, mostly the bigger projects like this, you have these monthly management update meetings, which are extremely formal meetings. A review of the entire project. And it's formalized like this for a purpose. It's formalized so that you understand the value and what the interest of this happens to be. So we'd go through these things every month. So I go in there, and I had a really good relationship with Mickey Steinberg because I just appreciated the pressure he was under. Without him, I'm sure the park wouldn't have gotten built at all. He really provides almost a military leadership kind of thing. He's a great guy, very volatile, He's like a General Patton, if that makes any sense to you over there.
Yeah. We get the reference, yeah.
So I'm sure there's some, comparable European leader like this, but a really brilliant guy, but he was pretty hard on people. But in a way,
on stairs too, I guess.
In a way, the way you're supposed to be. Not unfair, but the way you're supposed to do it. So anyway, we'd go in month after month, and I'd go into these meetings, and the budget would be up like $4 million or something. And so then we work, and then we'd be like, okay, go back to work. And, and it was like, you talk about the progress and how the contractors are coming and all that stuff. Anyway, so we go into this one meeting, and I sit down, and I'm like, okay, we'll start the meeting. So I say, well, okay. So, Mickey, every month we keep going, and we're really getting close this time. And he just says, stop. Just stop. Stop everything you're saying. Okay? I'm going to tell you something, what I'm going to do today. I am going to the studio, and I'm signing, along with the studio, the studio is the corporate offices for Disney, right? Yeah. So we're going to the studio, and I'm signing the authorization for this project, and it's going to be at the budget, right? So you and Doug, and you can take your entire team, and I'm going to say that we're signing this budget, or excuse me, we're signing this authorization for the project budget. Right? And that's what you have. Now, you need to do two things. Number one, you have to maintain the program, which is capacities, all that, whatever it's going to be. I mean, it's just there's all the numbers. It has to perform. It has to have THRC. It has to, all this stuff. And the second thing it's going to do is you're going to stay under budget. And those are the only two things you have to do.
So under now, $90 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, but I'm not going to say what the price is.
No.
So that's what you have to do. So now this meeting is now over. Your portion is done. Get out of here and go do it, and that's it. There is no option. Okay, that's what you have. So I was like, okay, that's great. Let's just go. Let's get on with this. Let's just do this, right? So it puts a lot of pressure on the project manager, but also, again, you have to work with people, and that was an era where budgets are always really important. So that's what we did. And so I was just like, I don't want to be spending any more time chasing, money. Let's just get on with this thing. Let's order the trial. Let's order the ride. Let's get on with the building. So then what happens is that they come back to me and said, look, we can do this project, but we cannot build the Space Mountain, the Space Mountains like you have here. They're poured in place concrete, roofs and all that stuff. They go, what we're going to do is we're going to build this ring around, and we want to put in a dome. We're going to buy a dome. And I was like, a dome? We can't do a dome. It'll look terrible, So I negotiated, and I said, all right, here's what I'll do. I will go with, and it was going to allow us to stay on budget, and it was going to be this quote unquote off the shelf Temcor dome. Mm-hmm. But I said, I'll do that, but you have to allow me to decorate the exterior of the building and put it into that traditional Space Mountain shape with spires on the top and, put all this stuff on it. And they were like, okay, we can do that. So we did. And so you work together with people, and that's how it happens. But there are certain things I said we have to have. We have to have this catapult launch on the exterior of the building. It has to be an inclined catapult, which is going to make it even more difficult. Yeah. This thing up the side of the mountain, and the guests who are in the land are going to watch people on this ride disappear into this mountain, and that's what we're doing. So we did it, and it just started. And everybody, believe me, everybody is very cooperative when you do that. Everybody wants to be successful. It's all very, very, very positive. So we began developing it, and the development process is just a very long, very long engineering, creative kind of thing. And there's a lot of studies done in color for the exterior of the building, and they key off all my illustrations, and it was great. We were moving forward and all that. So we start construction, and there's a very complex process that goes there that I just can't even begin to explain. It's just imagine there's multiple disciplines, probably 40, 50 different disciplines. You have great teams working on this project, people who are anywhere from structural engineers and ride engineers and coordinating and operations. Operations is with you all the time. They want to make sure it's safe, and, and there were things we did carry over from the original Discovery Mountain project. It was still called Discovery Mountain, by the way. So I said, well, I still want to have this walkthrough going through so people could actually walk through. We've never had anybody walk through one of these mountains before. Number one. Number two, I'm not so sure that we should have. I think we should build a great ride, and we need loops in the dark, and this has got to be something brand new. So they said, well, if we do that, then you can't have the load unload in the building. I'm like, great, let's put it outside. It was fine with me, again, that structure was a steel structure, wasn't all that expensive, and we could do it. And we made sure, because we had the 100-meter designated space for the original Discovery Mountain, having this new one at 62 meters gave us a lot of room out in front, or onto the side. So we did that too. And I started designing you design all that stuff. But the queue line was going to go through the middle of the building. And I just thought, the original queue went through the middle of the building, and that Star Walk or whatever it was, or
The Stellar Way?
direction, and you could for people who did not want to ride the ride, they could see the ride and then go into this outer space thing. And I thought it was so. The one thing, there is one thing that I do want to mention, and you've brought up all of these elements to it, which is a story point that I think is really important to talk about, and especially it's something you're not seeing as much in theme parks anymore, or maybe you didn't, but no matter what you do when you design things, and you all these things we talk about in terms of creating a story and developing characters and getting the right attraction, whether it's a ride or a theater or whatever the right attraction is, there's a lot of that goes on, but there's an element that's missing even a little bit today. And the most important thing that you have to remember on these things, this is a missing thing. This is for all those who are listening to this, want to learn about this. You have to learn about theater. You have to learn about show business. You have to learn about things, environments themselves. People remember. Listen to all those things that you just talked about when the cannon shoots the rocket up. And, all those things are really, really well thought out and talked about. And a lot of times they can be something that just gets thrown away. Either something, as I was telling you before, when you fight for something like, well, we need to have these lights going off so it looks like the rocket disappears. Sometimes, we can't maintain it. We shut those lights off and all that. But it's all those things, the recoil on the cannon and, that door, the breech door,
yes.
open.
Yeah, and the gears moving
all
too.
That. I did all these things. I listed every one of these things. I'm like, okay, let's just make it happen. Okay, let's just do it. And I knew, the recoil was just going to be problematic, because imagine you have a cylinder and the cylinder is open in the bottom. So the structural integrity was always going to be compromised. Okay. But
Yes.
They had it for a while, but all of those things, it's about great theater. The theatrical aspects of it. It isn't, you could have just put a catapult, shot it up, and be done with it. But
It's an
that's not
unforgettable vision, for sure.
Yeah, it's really important that, things have that kind of cause and effect and animation, because, there is a reason why you do most of your renderings at magic hour, Mm-hmm. You do them late in the afternoon or in the evenings, because you always want to show lighting, right, in your renderings, because that's how it sells everything. But
Yes.
But nonetheless, there were still some effects that were actually still pretty good. So anyway, so the fact that you brought all those things you remember, and the fact that, the ride sounded terrifying when you were inside it, because it goes twice as fast as any other Space Mountain. Yeah. So as the mountain, we finally got it going, and we were under construction, and they built the ring, and then they started to install the ride in, and the ride went inside, and then we built the roof over the top of it. Now I'm going to move on to the point where it's becoming really visible.